All right, so here today we start on the male reproductive system. We talked about the female reproductive system just before our break here, and now we're on to the male reproductive system. So you have a diagram in your notes that you've started filling out already. Let me just go over some of these terms so that you can understand maybe how to spell them. I'll zoom in, and we'll see how to pronounce them. All right. So there's a tube here, okay? So this long tube here, right here. Oh, it's frozen, sorry. So this long tube here is called the vas deferens, okay? The vas deferens, V-A-S-D-E-F-E-R-E-N-S, okay? Let's move counterclockwise here. So this little thing right here is called the seminal vesicle, the seminal vesicle. This is a gland, okay, that's kind of underneath your bladder, and this is the bladder. It's not labeled here. It's not really part of the reproductive system, but this is the bladder. So if you want to write that down, you can. Just note what that is right there. That's the bladder. But underneath the bladder is something called the prostate gland. We'll talk about all of these in detail as we move through. All right. The urethra is another tube here that travels from both the bladder and from the seminal vesicle out of the penis, and the elongated structure here is called the penis. And this is the epididymis. So this is a bit of a structure that's attached to the testicle. Okay, so like females have ovaries, males have testicles. The ovaries are kind of inside the body. Testicles are more or less outside of the body. They're not as internal, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that might be. Scrotum, okay, is sort of the fleshy sac, I guess, that contains the testicle. Okay, so you will have to label a diagram like this as we move through, so you can study that. All right, let's take a look. First things first, the scrotum that I just mentioned down here. Okay, so the scrotum contains the testicles, controls the temperature, and protects the testicles. Okay, so one of the reasons why the male reproductive system is a little bit more external is because of the temperature regulation. So the testicles can't get too hot, I guess. So there is built-in control there for a cooling of these parts here. So the scrotum acts as a barrier, obviously to protect a little bit, but mostly to regulate temperature. So blood flow inside the scrotum and things like that can either heat up or kind of cool down things inside. All right, the testicles themselves here are inside the scrotum, and they're also called the testes, They produce sperm and the sex hormones. So they produce the sperm. The testicle is where the sperm is produced, and also sex hormones. So hormones that are associated with puberty and with the onset of sexual maturity, that's where the hormones come from. Okay? Slightly disturbing color picture over here on the left shows you how the testicle's inside here, and we've got the different parts. Lots of blood vesicles and things like that. And of course, this outside part would be the scrotum. All right, the vas deferens and I don't know if I mentioned this, the epididymis, was that on your diagram? Did I miss that one? Yeah. I missed it. Oh, sorry, epididymis. Yeah, it's a bit of a funny word. Epididymis. Okay, so the vas deferens, okay. The sperm travel to the epididymis to finish maturing. Okay, so this is a bit of a small diagram here. So the epididymis is, I guess I pointed it out, but I didn't say it. So the epididymis is this sort of structure that's more or less attached to the testicle there. Sperm travels to the epididymis to finish maturing. The epididymis holds the sperm for approximately 70 days until the sperm are mature enough to leave the body. Okay. All right, so there is a maturation sort of period where the sperm, which is of course the male gametes, right? The male gametes there there is some maturity that has to happen there, and so that, I didn't realize it was this long, but 70 days until the sperm are mature enough to leave the body. From the epididymis, the sperm travel through the vas deferens up and around the bladder. Okay, so sperm is made in the epididymis, or made in the testicle, travels to the epididymis, stays there for 70 days. So what's that? Like 3.5 months until maturity. Then they were able to do their function, I guess, perform their function. And then from the epididymis, the sperm travel through the vas deferens, that tube that connects to the penis there. All right. So the vas deferens goes up and around the bladder, which we had mentioned here, the bladder. Not part of the sexual reproductive system, but nevertheless in there as well. So yes, in case you're wondering, the sperm and urine comes out the exact same place there. Okay, so different than the female reproductive system, right? You have the urinary tract for a female is different than the vaginal opening in the uterus there, but for males it's the same passageway. Men are just less complex. Maybe, yeah, maybe. If you want to put it that way, I'd be careful what I say there. But yeah, probably would be trouble for you. Yes, to say that. All right, the seminal vesicle. Okay, so the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland. Okay, what are they all about? So the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland produce a thick, milky fluid called seminal fluid. Okay. The seminal fluid combines with the sperm to make semen. All right, so a thick, milky fluid that is ejected from the male sex organ contains the sperm. It is not equal to the sperm. There is actually 2 parts there. Okay, so the seminal fluid may or may not contain sperm. Okay, the sperm has to mix with the seminal fluid to to be that kind of like milky fluid there. 1 drop of semen can contain as many as 5 million sperm cells. Okay. Any questions so far on the diagrams or the processes or what's connected to what here so far? You guys kind of getting there? All right. Moving on. The urethra. Okay, so the urethra is the passageway, as I mentioned before, in males for both urine and semen. So here's a picture of the bladder, okay? Once your bladder fills up with urine, then it's ejected out the urethra, okay? The urethra is the same passageway that also ejects the seminal fluid and the sperm. So semen is a mix of fluids that helps sperm swim. A male cannot urinate and ejaculate at the same time. All right, so the ejaculate is the term which we're going to talk about here next, I think. But that is the sort of the ejection of the seminal fluid. And it's impossible to go to the bathroom or to pee, or to urinate, and to ejaculate at the same time. Even though it's the same passageway, there's different workings. So that's the urethra, All right. Okay. So the penis. Okay, so the penis functions in urination and in reproduction. Delivers the sperm to the female during reproduction through a process called ejaculation. Okay? So as you may or may not know, the penis is inserted in the vagina, and ejaculation is basically a propulsion of this seminal fluid into the vagina where the 2 gametes can meet. Okay? So where the male sperm can be deposited into the vagina, can swim up, travel to the egg, and implant in the egg. Okay, so how that works is through the penis, and the penis is obviously there's lots of blood vessels in the penis, and so upon arousal, the penis stiffens up and firms up, and so obviously that makes it easier to be inserted into the vagina during this special and reverent process that we were talking about today. Okay? Any questions? I'm not assuming that you guys all know exactly how this works. So this is why we do this in school. This is information. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, I realize. So this is your chance to learn. So the next part of your notes there is ejaculation. Okay, so here's a picture of, again, we've got the bladder in the middle here, right? We've got the epididymis out here. Okay, that kind of that's the seminal vesicle over here. The epididymis is over here. So we've got sperm created in the testicle, sent to the epididymis to mature. Okay, and then it travels through here, mixes with the seminal fluid here. So this seminal vesicle is what produces the fluid that helps the sperm sort of move, right? So ejaculation, the sperm leaves the epididymis and travels through the vas deferens to the urethra in the penis. Muscular contractions force the semen out of the penis, okay? So when everything gets mixed here, okay, and it's ready to go, there's muscular contractions that happen sort of deep inside the system here, and it propels the fluid out the vas deferens there. Okay? Questions? So, I mean, it's obviously it's fairly involuntary, I would say. But these are, you know, if you think about swallowing food, right? Your food gets pushed down your tract there into your stomach by muscular contractions that's happening. You don't even know about it. It's not like every time you swallow, you're like, okay, I got to really like squeeze this food down, and you're like pumping your arms or something. No, it just happens internally, right? It's muscular contractions that kind of that squeeze sort of sequentially so that it pushes the food down into your stomach. So this is not something that you have to think about. It's muscular contractions that are triggered. Okay. All right. Let's talk about foreskin. Okay. So foreskin. The fold of skin at the end of the penis covering the glans. Now the glans wasn't on our diagram there, but the head of the penis, the end of the penis there is called the glans. And there's a fold of skin that covers the head of the penis. Okay, it's called the foreskin. The foreskin is sometimes removed during a process called circumcision, and so this is talked about in Bible times. Circumcision is something that's a very old religious tradition. Abraham, the Israelites, it was something that they dedicated themselves to God by circumcising their males, and it was a process of dedication, to the Lord, that sort of thing. Circumcision is basically they just kind of snip off the skin and it just heals, kind of like a cut on anywhere else in your skin. It usually happens when the baby is very young, days old, and it's a process that's usually pretty quick and pretty easy, as easy goes, I guess, as far as surgery goes. So circumcision is performed for religious, hygienic, or cultural reasons. Okay? All right, this is a disturbing picture, actually. I don't know if you guys will find this disturbing or not. This guy's like half shaven. I don't know, it's really weird. And I thought I'll throw that in there.
He probably shaved half his body.
Yeah, it might have. That's a little weird. Might have shaved this side and just pasted it on the other side. I kind of doubt it, but. All right, secondary sexual characteristics for males. Induced by increased testosterone hormone levels. So as you reach puberty and sexual maturity, there will be some secondary sexual characteristics, just like we talked about with the female secondary sexual characteristics. The fat deposits in the shape and the high voice and the different things like that, as well as body hair and stuff like that. Some of these are the same for men, but some obviously are very different. So pubic hair, so hair in the armpits and in the genital areas, obviously will start to emerge as well as other places. Deeper voice. So you've probably experienced this if you're a guy or seen or heard it. But when your voice changes, okay, the voice changes. There's lots of times there's like voice cracks that all of a sudden you're just talking. You're like talking and you're like voice, and all of a sudden you crack like this and you talk. And it's like, it happens once in a while. It's a little embarrassing. All of us guys go through it. But you kind of have this little voice when you're a kid, and then it turns into a deeper, mature voice. And that's because of obviously some hormones and growth of different things, and obviously different structures in our throats too that are different from male to female. Chest and facial hair, increased size of testes for sperm production. Okay, so obviously when we have, when boys have more testosterone now flowing through their body, this increases the speed and the maturity of sexual organs, and also has other byproducts as well. So this happens at different times for different guys. Sometimes, this happens early on, 10, 12 years old. Sometimes it doesn't really, happen till a bit later. There's usually as well a growth spurt, in this time when puberty is happening. All right, we talked a little bit about this already when we talked about meiosis and mitosis, but let's talk a little bit about sperm formation here. Meiosis forms sperm, and you remember meiosis is the process where cells reproduce, but they only reproduce into halves, like cells that have half of the genetic information, and that process results in gametes, where these are sex cells that are meant specifically to combine with male cells to combine with female cells to produce offspring. So meiosis forms sperm. The sperm are formed in the testes. Around 1,200 sperm are produced every second. So that's quite the feat there. And I'm sure this is an animation, but this is sort of what the sperm structure might look like. All right, so that ends the technical details, the diagrams, the parts, the functions. As well in your text, still in chapter 3 in your textbook here. Okay, reproductive and contraceptive technology. Okay, so first of all, let's just back up a little bit. Contraceptives are, it's technology, whether it's drugs or it's actual, intrauterine devices or other bits of technology that basically prevent conception. Okay, so it's contraceptive. Contra means the opposite of, so it's preventing conception. So they also, the kind of the larger area is reproductive technology. So again, there are pills, drugs, there are also devices and pieces of technology that can be used to foster reproduction or to inhibit reproduction. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here today. What types of reproductive and contraceptive technology do you know of? Okay, so here's your chance to be brave. Anybody know about any of these things? Sorry? Yeah? Yeah, birth control, right? Would be pills that the lady would take, the woman would take, sometimes injections and things like that. Yeah, yeah. It's basically chemicals that prevent conception or the implantation of the egg and stuff like that to prevent pregnancy. Yeah. Condoms, right? Yeah, condoms, piece of technology as well that is used, and that's obviously condoms are used to cover the penis on the male side, so that the sperm doesn't get into the, well, it's not 100%, that's for sure. They're not foolproof, but it is an inhibitory piece of technology. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there are morning after pills as well, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. So yeah, again, that's another piece of technology, chemicals that would hinder I guess, the implantation of a possibly fertilized egg. Yep. IEDs, yeah. IUDs is correct, yeah. Interuterine device is what IUD stands for, and yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about that as well. It's something that actually is inserted into the uterus, again, to prevent implantation of the eggs so that the pregnancy doesn't occur.
Isn't there also stuff that you can like cut off? Like
Yes, there are surgical procedures as well. Is that what you're meaning?
yes.
Yeah, there are surgical procedures which we'll talk about as well. Those are obviously a little more permanent things, but so here's some of the things that we had talked about that are, I'm going to see, are these in your notes? All right, so contraceptives are methods or devices used to prevent pregnancy. Okay. So condom, there also is a, yeah, there's also a condom type thing that can be inserted into the female as well, that is meant to yeah, stop the sperm from getting into the uterus as well there. Intrauterine device is, again, a device that can be placed inside the uterus to make conditions inside the uterus not suitable for implantation of a fertilized egg. It's oral contraceptive, so oral means you take them by mouth. There's other pills and things like that that basically disrupt the natural process of either conception or implantation to prevent pregnancy. They work by stopping the release of the mature egg, thickening the cervical mucus to make it difficult to get to the egg, and by changing the lining of the uterus to make implantation difficult. So there's three ways that this is accomplished. So preventing the release of a mature egg, thickening the cervical mucus to make it difficult for the sperm to get to the egg, and changing the lining of the uterus to make implantation difficult. And of course, following up the information here on contraceptive technology, I should add that there are many ethical and for some moral reasons why this would not be considered as a possible method of controlling pregnancy. So there certainly is no judgment here for anyone that uses or does not use contraceptive technology. Just trying to get the information out to you, and you guys are young enough, hopefully, that you haven't been burdened by all of this yet, but this is something that you need to know about. So again, I guess it is important for each of you to know that whether you or your partner decide to use any of this stuff, that's not for me to decide. That's for you just to consider. But there are some moral objections to this by some. There are some ethical considerations that each of us would have to consider as well. Knowing the natural process of what happens in conception and pregnancy and birth. To kind of mess around with that in certain ways is something that needs consideration. It needs lots of open discussion too. So hopefully that's something that you'll be able to use the information now that you're given. You'll be able to use that in the future to make good decisions for you. But anyways, I'm just kind of giving you the details here. So sterilization is another form or method by which pregnancy can be prevented or disrupted, I guess. Sterilization is permanent. It's a permanent form of birth control. Both men and women can choose to undergo sterilization process. All right. Did you get those blanks there? Contraceptive technology. Okay, sterilization for women, it's called a tube ligation, where the fallopian tubes are disconnected from the uterus. So the euphemism for this is getting your tubes tied. You may have heard that before. If you get your tubes tied, that basically means that the fallopian tubes are cut and they're kind of tied off. Now, this is not a very good picture. I would say this almost looks like more of a reattachment, but maybe, yeah, I don't know if there's a better picture, probably not. Yeah, that's for the male. But anyways, so the fallopian tube would be cut, and in some cases, I think like basically like incinerated at the ends to cauterize them, so that they're no longer functional at the ends. And then there would be a tie, and these are most of the diagrams that I've seen. So you have the tube here, and it's cut first of all, and then cauterized, or kind of like almost like burnt or like zapped with a laser or something, so that there's no flow here. This is definitely kind of stopped, just like you would anyways. And then there would be it would be tied off here. It would be kind of choked off and tied off, not in a bow probably, but it would be tied off here so that no eggs could pass through anymore, right? And so you would kind of do this to both ends. So this is a bit misleading, I think. This almost looks like they're trying to tie them back together, but anyways, disconnected and kind of tied off. Yeah, this diagram almost looks like they're trying to reattach, so it's maybe misleading, but. All right, contraceptive technology sterilization for the male side, okay. The procedure for men is called a vasectomy, in which the vas deferens is surgically disconnected, okay. So again, this is a bit of a different view of the reproductive system. Here are the testes, and there are two in all those other diagrams. It looked like there was only one in all those other diagrams, but kind of a cross-sectional view. There are two testicles. The vas deferens here comes from the epididymis, right, to the seminal vesicle, and to the gland here, and then to the urethra. So it's cut right here, okay? So inside the scrotum there, the doctor makes an incision, goes in there, cuts the vas deferens, does the same sort of thing, probably cauterizes it and ties it off and stuff like that. And now it is possible that over time that this tube, grows together again and becomes functional again. It doesn't happen very often, but it is known to have happened. So these are not fail-safe, although they're pretty secure. Okay. Now I guess it is important to note here too that because you may eventually have questions if you don't know, but when these things happen, the hormones and the fluids and stuff still get produced. The semen, the sperm that comes and meets with the semen, that the sperm just doesn't get there, but the semen the seminal fluid is still created, and the sexual act and the ejaculation of fluid and stuff all still happens. It's just that there's no sperm inside there, so that's why it's a sterilization. So it's not like you're I'm sure there's a wide variety of misconceptions, but you don't get everything cut off, first of all. And it's not like, you can't have sex anymore after a sterilization process, because for both male and female, obviously, you still can. It's just that inside there are no sperm now connecting and mixing in with the fluid. Okay? So that's how that works. Questions? All right. Yep. Yep.
And they tie up sperm, it's trying to go through. Does the sperm?
Yep. That's a good question. What happens to the sperm then? Because obviously the sperm is still generated. It's still sent to the epididymis to mature. It still does, but it travels up this tube here, but where it would normally keep traveling and connect in here, and then connect with the fluid, it just stops here. So it kind of just builds up and dies and dissolves. And I don't know if it passes through the walls of the vas deferens or what, but yeah, it's a great question. The sperm just kind of die in here, I guess, and I'm not sure where they go after that, or if they, like I say, just dissolve into organic, material. Yeah.
Is there at a certain age, or will it just always?
It's a good question. I think that I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think as you age and get older, there's less and less, sperm count goes down. You've heard of sperm count. Doctors can actually, scientifically examine sort of how much sperm there is in a given sample, and sperm count. If a sperm count is really low, this may be a reason why couples can't get pregnant. Sperm count in the male is really low. And of course, with age too, there's just things don't quite work the same in older people's bodies, right? This is how it works. So yeah, there would be a natural sort of real drop off in what's produced. It's a good question. Why is there 2 testicles, not just one? I guess same reason why there's sort of 2 fallopian tubes and not just one. It is possible that there could be damage to one and the other could kind of still function. I think it's just more or less a double the function, double the chance for, and if there's any injury or something like that. So it's kind of like a spare tire, probably only one is required for this, but again, if there is damage or if something doesn't function correctly, there still would be a chance that this whole system could function. So that's my best answer. Again, I'm not a reproductive technologist, but I would say that just double the chances of this actually still working over time and with trauma. All right. Okay, we'll keep going. We'll finish up here. Reproductive technology. So you may have heard of in vitro fertilization. IVF. Okay, you may have heard of in vitro fertilization. This refers to fertilization of the egg in a lab. Okay, so obviously the natural process would be a fertilization of the egg within the fallopian tube of the woman, but in vitro fertilization is where egg and sperm are both extracted and in the lab are sort of in the right environment, chemically induced and where fertilization can occur in the laboratory. Mature eggs and sperm are collected, put in a dish where fertilization takes place. Here?
Can't they also
Yeah, freezing. Okay, so obviously mature sperm have a lifespan, but there is a way that they can be stored under in extreme cold, I guess, be frozen in a sense, so that they can remain intact and then be used at a later date after they would normally have died. So yeah, there would be some storage for the egg as well, because obviously this is a time-sensitive process. So if it's something that's going to be done, scientifically in a lab, then there would have to be some storage and some delay required. So once fertilization has occurred, embryos are inserted into the uterus for implantation. So it's kind of like, let's say that a couple, there's hindrances to conception for whatever reason. Maybe it's a low sperm count or something like that, or maybe the woman has a very irregular production of eggs or virtually no production of eggs. Having trouble, those eggs are having trouble kind of getting out into the fallopian tube where they can be reached. And so that is something that can be identified, and there are obviously medical procedures that can help this happen outside of the body. So pretty amazing. But again, there are different issues that are related to stuff like this as well. Yeah. Okay, continuing on. So in vitro fertilization continued, 6 basic steps: monitor and stimulate development of healthy eggs in the ovaries, collect eggs, secure sperm, combine eggs and sperm together in the laboratory, provide appropriate environment for fertilization and early embryo growth, and then those embryos would be then transferred into the uterus. And again, you would hope that implantation takes root and the rest of the natural processes sort of kick in. So it's an expensive, time-consuming, obviously very emotional process. This often happens for couples that have tried for years to have babies and have been unsuccessful. This might be an option for some. And but obviously there's a lot riding on this, right? It's a very emotional thing to have a baby and especially to try and not be able to have one. It's quite a thing for a couple to go through. All right, were you guys good with that one? Did you get your blanks, sir? No? All right, artificial insemination, AI. This is a procedure used to treat infertility. And of course, infertility is the term given to being, the state of not being fertile. So if you're unable to conceive or to stay pregnant, That would be infertility. You're not able to have kids. This is it involves direct insertion of semen into a woman's uterus. The process was originally used for livestock. Okay, so this is a common practice for livestock. You secure semen, and then it's basically injected into the cows. Cattle. I grew up on a farm with cattle, so I know a little bit about this sort of thing. And so this is used when, I guess, the female has sort of the typical processes able to happen in her reproductive system. So an egg is produced, an egg is able to be fertilized. It could be a problem, like I say, in low sperm count, or it could be a problem with the reproductive system of the husband there. And so artificial insemination would be an actual, insertion by other means of semen into the uterus. So sometimes here, the semen could come from the woman's male partner or from a different man. So artificial insemination, obviously, if a couple wants to get pregnant, let's say there is a problem with sperm production in the husband, then they might opt for using someone else's sperm. This happens, and this process would be used, a very scientific, technical process where doctors would insert, conceivably, I guess, semen from someone else. So semen from wherever gets inserted into the uterus for hopeful conception and pregnancy. All right, human sex selection. Okay, sex selection is an attempt to control the sex of the offspring to achieve a desired sex. Okay, couples go through the IVF process, but only embryos of the desired sex are implanted in the uterus. So herein lies the part of the sort of ethical / moral, I guess, entanglements that one might encounter in reproductive technology. And I actually knew of a reproductive technologist that had to get out of the profession because of like I said, the moral repercussions of, I guess, what they were doing. So in IVF, lots of times there are many eggs that are fertilized, and many eggs that start reproducing. So, in the view of many, you have many little babies that are actually starting there. And what happens in this sort of thing is that they would be able to scientifically determine which of those are male and female right away. And they would only keep, let's say, if they wanted a male, if they wanted a son, then they would only implant the male ones, and they would discard the female ones, or vice versa. So, like I say, this person that I actually did know that had to go into a different field was because basically every day there were all of these eggs, and they had to basically garbage most of them and keep one or two to use. And so that just kind of got to them after the while. It's like, yeah, no, I know what's happening here. This is, we're generating like life, really. And now I'm just tossing away the life that I don't want to see continue. And that was a moral, entanglement for that person. Okay? And I'm not giving any, I'm not assessing value one way or the other, but it is a consideration, and that's just a story that I knew of. So in this process, there is some selectivity that can be achieved here, and male female is obviously the one thing that does happen sometimes. So. All right, as we continue, I guess we talked about this a little bit earlier: freezing and egg donation. IVF is extremely expensive and often very stressful on couples, as fertilized eggs do not always implant. Eggs are often frozen so they can be thawed and used at a later date. Some of the eggs or zygotes could be donated to another couple who cannot conceive on their own. So, this kind of thing can be used for good to help those that can't conceive as well. But it is, as you can tell, it's kind of, you're delving into this process, and how much are you sort of directing life, right? It's a bit of a, it's something that is inescapable. Questions that need to be asked, and many people in the field obviously don't have a problem with it. They see the benefits of this, and so on. But it is, I guess, it's important to note too that even if there is an egg that has been fertilized and is starting to develop, that if it's inserted, it may not implant. The uterus may not be at the state where it's actually able to accept that and to foster implantation. All right, which brings us to the end of this section, and we're going to take a look at Chapter 3 questions, I guess. Chapter 3 questions.